Hello everybody and welcome back to Pravus Gaming and More Democracy 3 Australia, playing on maximum difficulty, and last time we had our election and it went swimmingly. We got like, what was it, 80-something% of the vote? It was amazing. Mandatory voting worked out for us in a big way, and from here on out, I imagine it should be more or less smooth sailing until our next election, which is when I'm going to end the series. So, the only thing I'm a little bit worried about right now is one, the doctor strike, which actually, yes, is about to go away as of next turn, so that's good at least. So that actually should improve our health by about 26%. That's going to be really nice. Okay, good. I'm also really worried about this water shortage. There's not a very good, inexpensive way to deal with this. I mean, we need to improve the environment, yes, obviously, and it's still getting worse and worse, but if this goes too high and the food prices skyrocket, we might have a different kind of crisis on our hands. And there are a few ways to get around that, but we'll deal with them as they come to it. I'm kind of in a position here where now I am so confident, even on maximum difficulty, that we're going to be fine, that if we have a negative event, if I am negligent and bad things happen, I'm okay with that. It could be a learning experience for you guys to see how the game works. You know, there are a few steps I could take to try and prevent a food crisis, but you know, if it happens, it happens. And I'm not worried about my ability to deal with it, so we're going to be fine. Now let's take a look at some of the other negative events going on here. Pollution and stuff, yeah, obviously we need to deal with that pretty soon. The asthma epidemic also kind of sucks and makes a lot of parents very unhappy. But if we get rid of something like the alcohol abuse, that's something we can at least start making some headway toward. Alcohol consumption is by a long shot the driver of this, because apparently you can abuse alcohol even if you don't drink alcohol. Yeah, no. Obviously, consumption's the big driver here. So if we can reduce this by any means, we can either tax it or we could just change the law. That could also work. Apparently, the minimum age for alcohol consumption in Australia is 18. If we raise that up to 21, we're going to go from 10% for it to 10% against. So that's a good 20% swing right there in alcohol consumption. Of course, liberals aren't very happy with this. Violent crime does go down, though, because kids aren't getting drunk and the youth aren't very happy. But it's a pretty effective way of trying to deal with some of the alcohol consumption issues. So, I mean, hey, they had their opportunity to be responsible citizens and drink in moderation, but then they abused it. I know this because we have the event called Alcohol Abuse. So, desperate times call for desperate measures. Honestly, I'm not really sure why someone came up with the age of 21. It seems kind of arbitrary. I mean, 18 I understand, you know, because that's when you become a legal adult in most Western societies. Why 21? Why 3 years later? What's the significance of the number 21? Is there a historical basis for that? There probably is, and I have no idea what it is. I don't know. I didn't drink any alcohol until I was 21. I followed the law. Most people I know do not. But I didn't want to get in trouble, and I was a good boy. So, yeah, that was me. But now I enjoy it a fair bit, but always in moderation. Just understand, kids. Drinking in excess, it's not fun. It's bad for your health. And honestly, it leads to a heck of a lot more regret than it does fun times. That's been my personal experience with it. Anyway, a few other things that we could do. We got 12 political capital left. Why don't we do something simple like maxing out our prisons? Where'd those go? What was that sound? Oh, that was my wife's computer over there. Prisons! Should always set this to extensive rehabilitation in every game. It's not always a huge priority, but for now, it's not bad. This will make the liberals a lot happier. Conservatives even will like it as well. And it doesn't cost a ton of money. So maybe I can throw a bone to the liberals so that they are less inclined to kill me. I mean, there's a lot of people who are wanting to kill me. I mean, look at this. They're fanatically opposed. You suck, liberals. Yeah, well, hopefully this will shut them up just a little bit. And let's see what else we can do. Anything exciting? You know, we could pass some cycling campaigns and stuff. Yeah, let's go ahead and do this. This doesn't cost a lot of money. Only a couple $100 million. But it does improve our health by about 4%. It also reduces car usage, bus usage, train usage, anything else, basically. This does exact same thing, but it's more expensive, subsidizing the bikes instead of trying to persuade them. So, yeah, I mean, that's a pretty good use of some political capital. Let's just max out our health. That'll be fine. Liberal plot. Unsurprising. A company shuts down a plant. Oh, no. A major employer in our nation has just shut down one of its car factories, making 1,000 citizens redundant. A drop in car usage by your citizens as well as poor labor productivity are being cited. Yeah, bad productivity, huh? Well, give it about a year, and I imagine it's going to go up a lot more. But anyway, now we have some unemployment and the GDP gets reduced a little bit, which, okay. Doctor strike is at an end, though, so our health should more or less get maxed out pretty soon. And we have a budgetary surplus of about $13 billion. You know, we could probably compound this by passing some more taxes and try to boost up our equality because we are socialist after all. We've been playing kind of loose with that, you know. We've been appeasing capitalists and getting a lot of capitalist policies out there to try and boost up our GDP. But now that things are looking pretty darn good, maybe we should try to make socialists a little bit happier. Maybe we should go back to our roots and pass a mansion tax, a special tax on the ownership of really large, expensive homes. Now, of course, this seems a little bit arbitrary to me. What counts as a really expensive home? You know, it depends entirely on the cost of living of where you are. I can't speak much to the prices of housing in Australia, but I know that, for example, where I grew up in Arizona, where the cost of living, at least at the time, was dirt cheap and you could build a really big house for a relatively good price, as opposed to, I don't know, California, where you can have a much smaller house for four times the price. You know, that's expensive, but is it luxurious? I don't know. It's just another kind of a luxury tax, but it's on real estate, basically. And the elderly don't like it because they've saved up for all their lives, and now they've retired and they can have a nice home, but now we're taxing them, so they don't like that. It's a wealth tax. It's kind of punitive, honestly, but we can get at least a little bit of money out of it, and honestly, maybe I'll just leave it right here in the middle. It barely touches equality is the problem, right? Like, you have to really max it out to have any impact on equality, which basically says no one will own a mansion at all. That's what would happen. And the retired would be absolutely furious with me. So yeah, definitely kind of an exponential effect going on there. I mean, if we set it to like right here or so, this seems to be right before it starts to skyrocket. We could set it right about here, I guess. It only boosts our quality by about 1.6%. I never do a mansion tax. I never do punitive taxes on the rich. It's just not something I do, even in my socialist playthroughs. It tends to lead to brain drains and all sorts of nasty stuff. We're just going to leave it right about where it is in the middle. I'm not going to mess with it too much. It's probably fine. And let's just go ahead and end that. So that's going to be at least a little bit of extra money for me. How much was it? About 4.7 billion. It's not a lot, but it's something. I mean, you never know. We might use that to try and improve the environment and stuff. Could actually do recycling and stuff as well, but I had other things that I wanted to do. You know what, let's actually just go ahead and boost up our... Well, that's not a lot of gain. How much is this? We're about doubling its cost. 4 points in order to gain an extra 1%? 2%. Alright, fine. We'll go ahead and pass recycling. It's not that bad. Let's move on to the next turn. Liberal plots, blah, blah, blah. Appoint a UN ambassador. Our ambassador to the UN retires this year. We need to name a successor as soon as possible. Okay. So we can have a patriotic conservative who is not popular internationally, against foreign aid, supporter of tariffs, protectionism, got it, or a liberal socialist. We got a bit of a conflict of interest here. I don't want to make the liberals happy, but I don't want to upset the socialists. On the other hand, patriots and conservatives are good for us. Sorry socialists, but I think we're going to have to go with Julia Smith. She's a firecracker, that Julia. We got 90% of the vote, by the way. So, you know, this is, again, why I'm not worried about the next... I'm not really worried about the next election at all. I wanted to read that quote. I just missed something. It said something about fascism. Whatever. You could just keep cycling it and find it all if you want to. But anyway. All right, let's pass a few more environmental policies. We could do the clean fuel subsidy. Now, this is actually really quite good, I think. Yeah, it's not bad. It's not bad at all. It improves the environment by about 7.5%. Motorists like it because we are subsidizing their fuel, so we're actually making it a little bit cheaper for them to use the cleaner fuel. Put a little bit more money in their pocket. They like that a lot. Let's go ahead and do that. What else could we pass? We could pass the... Actually, you know one thing I haven't passed? There we go, clean energy subsidies. These are also a very heavy lifter when it comes to improving the environment. Now, they are a bit expensive. $4.5 billion is not much to sneeze at, but look at that. We're talking a 26% improvement in the environment over the next 8 turns. I mean, that's not bad. It's pretty good, in fact. So the environmentalists will love this. Capitalists will be a little bit peeved off, but it's not a huge deal, honestly. The gains far outweigh the losses. The only downside is in a very expensive cost, but I think I'm all right with that. Now, of course, by reducing CO2 emissions, I think we're actually reducing the amount of money we get from the carbon tax. So, a little bit of a whammy on me for that one, but you know, it's probably okay, right? What else could we pass? Something fun, something good, something I don't usually do because we get to experiment. What was that? Home fabrication grants. Now, this is something we very rarely touch. It's not bad. Yeah, okay, let's show you how this one works. So we basically are subsidizing 3D printers so that pretty much anybody, your average citizen, is able to buy a basic 3D printer and manufacture little items for themselves. And that's it. You know, they don't have to go buying goods from overseas. It probably reduces international trade. In fact, I'm pretty sure it does. Some people might actually turn it into their own home business. I mean, that's all we're doing. We're spending $1.4 billion in order to try and give people the means to make their own parts and stuff. 3D printers are awesome. I got to use some of those in my own college. I actually tried to design a product that would fit in my car's cup holder, but was also a stand for my iPod. That's what I was trying to develop. And it actually worked pretty well, but I only made one, and I don't think I still have it. I think I lost it at one point. Actually, I think one of my friends stole it. I'm not gonna lie. What happened to that? Anyway, let's go ahead and max this thing out. So yeah, international trade reduces a lot, but that's not because we're trying to like spit in the face of other nations as much as our own people just become a lot more self-reliant as far as building their own products, which is pretty useful. I like that. Of course, the other nations don't really like that I'm doing that because they want to sell me goods, but you know what? Whatever. It's almost like a tariff, but it doesn't make me money. Almost. Middle earnings goes up a little bit, though, so the middle class will be a lot happier. The self-employed membership goes way up. Surprisingly, capitalists are not happy by this, and I can understand that as far as subsidizing this, but if they're not willing to adapt to the changing market and the new technologies available to the people, then honestly, screw them. That's all I gotta say. Let's go ahead and pass the alcohol awareness campaign since we already decided to go ahead and try and reduce alcohol consumption in this video. Let's see how that works. Okay, so it is dipping down a little bit. It's got a long way to go, unfortunately. Yeah, it's probably gonna drop by about 15 to 20% more ish. It's not a lot. I'm actually not entirely sure it's gonna be enough to get rid of the alcohol abuse. Maybe. It's got a few more turns of inertia to go. It could very well be that it is worth raising a tax on alcohol. Of course, this reduces equality and makes the poor unhappy and increases poverty and stuff because despite the fact that the prices are going up, the poor absolutely have to have their wine, their yellowtail. You know, this is, yeah. The thing about the alcohol abuse, though, is it is costing us $7 billion in order to put up with this. All the costs as far as the bad health, as far as crime and disorder that we have to put down. You know, it's a pretty expensive thing. It may seem like it's just not a big deal because it just increases the cost of your state healthcare service, but that's pretty significant. Don't underestimate it, guys. Don't underestimate it at all. All right, let's go ahead and move on into the next turn. By the way, I'm aware that I have not done really like any rants lately, which is disappointing some people. Ooh, technological advantage. Yes! That's what I like to see. The GDP and the productivity is going to start going up. Pretty soon, we're going to have the high productivity event, too. Nice. Yeah, I'm aware, but to be honest, there's just not a whole lot to talk about. I mean, I spent a fair bit of time, you know, after the election in the United States, just kind of isolating myself from Facebook and politics and being like, all right, it's all done. I need to take a breather. And that's been kind of nice. That's not to say that I don't follow politics. I just haven't been really getting all uptight and wanting to talk about it a lot. You know? That said, though, there was actually something really cool recently. So in the United States, they recently just had, CNN just recently hosted a debate between Ted Cruz, who was a Republican presidential candidate, and Bernie Sanders, who was a Democratic presidential candidate, about healthcare in America and the future of the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare. It was actually a really interesting debate, and honestly, freaking heck, those are the kind of debates that we should be having before a presidential election, by God. It was substantive. It wasn't like a bunch of character, you know, assault. It was actually debating policy and worldview and how the government ought to work and whether healthcare should be a right or not, and what's the best economic market method of doing so. Bernie Sanders made a lot of really good emotional arguments as to how people will be affected if you don't, you know, keep the Affordable Care Act and if you don't expand Medicaid and stuff. And Ted Cruz just spouted facts after fact after fact as far as statistics. It was a really interesting debate. I really wish more of our debates were like that. That was civil and it was interesting, and they actually found some common ground in a few areas too. I don't know, I came away with that with a little bit more respect for both of them in the end, I think. But it actually, okay, so I wasn't going to go into a rant about this, and I'm not going to go into it. And this is where I'm going to deviate off topic of the game a little bit, and I'll include a skip link. But this is actually something where I want to engage you guys directly and ask a question, because I thought this was very interesting. I was thinking about this after watching that debate. Rights. Where do they come from? Who determines what they are? And really think about how you answer that question, because I think it's actually really important as far as developing the foundation for your worldview when it comes to politics, government, and even the concept of freedom and liberty. How you answer that question will determine your worldview, I think. Where do our rights come from? How do we know what they are? See, I'm willing to bet that in Europe especially, but many other places as well, including some people here in the United States, most people will think, without thinking about it too much, they'll simply say, well, rights are just basically what we all decided that they are. You know, we as a society have decided this. We as a society determine I have the right to free speech. We as a society have determined that we have a right to healthcare, affordable healthcare for even the poor. We have a right to all these different things. Because we hear people use the term rights all the time. And it seems to me that there are a lot of people who say it kind of flippantly, almost just we have a right to a product or a good or a service or some sort of quality of life. I have a right to a standard of living. Do you? And some people will say, yes, we as a society have determined that. And if you believe that, stand by with me, because I'm about to, I don't know if I rock your world, but I'm about to educate you on a very different perspective. Because that perspective right there, that mankind determines our rights, is the exact opposite, fundamental opposite perspective upon which America was founded. Or rather, I should say, America was founded on the opposite idea. That's a simpler way to say it. America was founded on a very different philosophy. If you ever read the works of Thomas Paine or John Locke, they were some philosophers, and they dived into the question as to the rights of man and what that means. And both of them, I think, are fairly influential. At least certainly John Locke is certainly influential when it comes to the development of the United States government. I mean, you can see it right there in our Declaration of Independence. Let's go over the Declaration of Independence real quick. The very beginning is very obvious. We hold these truths to be self-evident, obvious, that all men are created equal, and that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. Rights that can never be taken away. Rights that are given to us by God, or if you don't believe in God, perhaps nature, the natural law. And the chief among these are the right to life, to exist, liberty, our freedom, and the pursuit of happiness, our own self-determination and sense of agency to pursue our own self-interest and what we think will make us happy. Those are the three things that are listed off in the Declaration of Independence. But I really want to hammer in the point here. Certain inalienable rights bestowed upon us by our Creator. That is the foundational principle upon which America was founded. And still, in a lot of ways, our government reflects that to this day. It's interesting. The idea of, do human rights originate from man because we've determined so, or do human rights originate in nature? And that's really important, because if rights can be given by mankind, your society, well, then that implies that rights can also be taken away by society. Right? But we don't want that, do we? I don't know. That seems kind of arbitrary. It seems like a justification for mob rule, that if the people decide, hey, we don't want free speech anymore, they can take that away, as if it's something that can be annulled that easily. But the American perspective upon which America was founded is, you can't take away our right to free speech. I don't care if 80% of the vote says take away free speech. This is our God-given right. You can't take this from us. And the purpose of government, the sole purpose of government in that point, is safeguarding our inalienable rights. And any institution in the nation that does not enhance those rights or protect those rights is illegitimate. Monarchy, for example. An absolute monarchy that takes away our rights to liberty and the pursuit of our own happiness, that's an illegitimate form of government. Right? It's interesting. It sounds like it's so simple, right? Like it's such a fine distinction, but I think it ultimately changes your entire view of how government works and what society can actually do. Let me give you an example of something here. You look at Canada, and I'm going to forewarn you guys, this is something from a couple years ago. If I'm misremembering it, then I apologize, and I hope some Canadians will correct me on this. But Canadians like to say that they have free speech, kind of like we do in America, you know? And Europe, by the way, says the same thing. Oh, we have free speech as well, you know, so America's not so much freer than the rest of the world. Well, okay. But in Canada, I seem to remember reading an article a couple years ago that under Justin Trudeau, a new law was passed making it illegal to spread anti-transgender propaganda. There was some kind of vague interpretation as to what that would mean and what that would look like, what defines propaganda, but some people were very much afraid that that meant if I go out there and say, hey, I actually think that transgenderism is a bad thing, it actually originates from mental illness and gender dysphoria or gender identity disorder. If you said something like that, could you be punished? Could you be fined? Could you be thrown in prison under new Canadian law? And at the end of the day, I don't know. I don't remember what came out of that. But that was a very interesting question, because it's like, well, in America, at the very least, even if your views were considered wrong, and I'm not getting into the transgender argument right now. Maybe it's right, maybe it's wrong. I'm not interested in talking about that right now. But my point is, regardless of whether it's right or wrong, you can say that in the United States. You can. Hate speech is actually a fantastic other example. In fact, maybe it's a better example. Hate speech, saying something hateful about another person or group. Some people think that that should be just straight up illegal. In fact, a lot of college kids in the United States seem to think that that should be illegal. But the United States Constitution, absolutely not. I don't know what it's like in Europe. Maybe you think hate speech should be banned. Maybe it's some sort of violence of sorts. But in the United States, absolutely not. The First Amendment protects hate speech just like everything else. For example, if I want to walk up and down the street and yell, I hate all black people and I think they're inferior, well, that's racist and that's a hateful, horrible thing to say. And hopefully no one will listen to you because you're an idiot. But you have the right to say it. So that's one of the things about the United States is even hateful groups like the KKK, even Nazi parties even exist here in the United States, technically. They're small. Barely anyone pays them any attention, and for good freaking reason. I don't support them at all. But they exist, they're allowed to exist. I've heard Europeans say, well, why do you even allow this? Because they have that right. They can say what they want. They can believe what they want. They can speak their mind and their opinion without any reprisal. That is part of their rights, as listed out by nature, by John Locke and Thomas Paine and stuff like that. They have the right to their own freedom of expression and their own sense of agency. That's a fundamental tenet. It doesn't come from man. So man does not have the right to revoke even something like hate speech. Now, for the record, before people get too confused about this, there are some distinctions in the United States where you can say whatever you want. What you say is not what's important, but how you say it, as far as whether or not it's just speaking your mind or whether it's a call to action, that's a very different thing. Okay, so for example, if I walk up and down the street yelling, I hate black people, well, that's protected speech. It's wrong, but it's protected. But if I walk up and down the street yelling, black people are evil, we should kill them all, come on, who's with me, let's go get them, well, that's a call to action. That's inciting a riot. It's not just what you're saying at that point, it's what you're doing. That's an action. So there's a bit of a distinction in that sense, but everything else is pretty much fair game, even if it's wrong. I've heard many people say things that I think are wrong, but I don't think we have the right to shut them up. And no matter how distasteful it is, we as a society do not have the right to revoke that from them, because our human rights do not come from man, they come from nature. Natural rights, in and of itself. I mean, the entire United States Constitution is founded upon this concept. Why do you think the Second Amendment exists? I've talked about this before in another series, but why do you think the Second Amendment exists? Because we have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. First off, owning a weapon, a gun, can be used for pursuit of happiness. Some people like hunting and just shooting for recreation. Sure, why not? They can have a gun for that reason. Some people need it to protect themselves from those who would try to kill them or, take their property or something like that in their own home. Self-defense, absolutely, that's an important thing. The right to life must include the right to defend your life. But what about the right of liberty? Absolutely, the Second Amendment exists to ward off any government that might become tyrannical and therefore illegitimate by taking away our liberty. We have the right to defend ourselves from our own government. That's why the Second Amendment exists. It's all three of those basic rights laid out in the Declaration of Independence, put into our Bill of Rights in the Constitution. I don't know. I'm not going to go too much further into it than this, but I'm really interested in hearing some of the answers and the instinct you have on this, because the more you dive into philosophy, political philosophy, you go into the works of during the Enlightenment. You read John Locke, you read Hobbes, you read Paine, you read Rousseau. There's a lot of very interesting perspectives on the rights of man and where they come from. What is man's natural state? I don't know. I just think that's interesting. I think that's really interesting. Now, maybe you think that's an outdated, silly idea. Maybe you do, and if so, you can say so in the comment section. But I don't think you can really argue that that's not what America was founded upon. It's in our Declaration, it's in our Constitution. John Locke's influence is all over the place. And it's fascinating to understand that. That's what sets America apart, I think. Whereas the American Revolution was basically founded upon the idea, oh, well, we have certain rights that can never be taken away from us. You know, the king of Britain doesn't have a right to take away our rights. Those are from God, and we will defend them to the death. Whereas the French Revolution, which I think inspired a lot of democracy in Europe and still influences to this day, is basically the people say, hey, we, the people, the majority of the people, no longer consider you legitimate ruling, and we want to change the rules because society says so, because the majority says so. It's a very different idea of how to pursue freedom and liberty. I just think it's interesting, and I'd be very interested in hearing your opinions on this. It's not so much a rant, it's just me trying to kind of explain things as I've been learning it, because I've been studying John Locke a lot lately, and I'm seeing that influence, and I think it's fascinating. So I'd be interested in hearing your opinions on this. Where do you think our rights come from, ultimately? Do they come from man, or do they come from something a bit deeper than that? Because what man giveth, man can taketh away. But if our rights come from something beyond just society and the mob, well then, there's kind of almost a wholly righteous defense of those freedoms, isn't there? I don't know. It's just interesting. Anyway, I've been waffling on from that for long enough. Let's go ahead and move on into Year 4. I just think it was an interesting topic, something worth talking about. It was something I was thinking about as I watched that debate. I just kind of wanted to get your thoughts on that. What else can we do? You know what? This is something I was thinking we want to do today. Let us do government subsidies for unions. So, trade unions provide a vital service to the nation. It is in the collective interests of the people that they be encouraged and supported. So the government should be willing to subsidize them with tax dollars. It only costs about $1.2 billion, but we haven't done a lot to make trade unionists happy in this playthrough so far. By doing this, not only are we going to make trade unionists really happy, we are also increasing our socialism membership by 9%. Also trade unionist membership, which is pretty good. And, this is interesting, there is an assumption in this game that the more unionized people are, the more wages go up. Which is actually more or less true. You know, I've railed on certain trade unions in the past, specifically teachers' unions and stuff, but the truth is that unions generally do increase wages. That's certainly true. I think that sometimes that comes at a cost. You've increased wages, but you've also made your nation's industry less competitive abroad, and as a result, you might be causing a lot of economic inefficiency and detriment, but yeah, it definitely seems to increase wages for the average person. So, I don't know. Some people like it, some people think that it's really bad. For us, we want to make those trade unionists happy, and we want to have a lot of them. So this should increase their happiness by 27.5%. I imagine they're going to come to about, like, right here, or something like that. No, that's motorists. Wait. Right about here, or so, on the happiness scale. I mean, not that we needed more votes per se, but I think some of our members were, what's your name? Haley Mills. Haley Mills likes trade unionists. Renee McDonald likes them. Yeah, they're the only two people that like trade unionists. But this should get us some more political capital in the long run, so I think that's probably a good thing. What else should we do? You know what? We'll just go ahead and pass a diplomatic service because we want to increase our foreign relations. We'll pass a tourism ad campaign to also increase foreign relations and tourism and, you know, get people down under. See those kangaroos and stuff? I don't know, wallabies and koalas and all sorts of crazy stuff. Australia is a really unique, you know, part of the world. You got some incredible biodiversity down there. But anyway, that's about it, though. I don't think there's anything else we really want to do. So I'm going to go ahead and end this video here. Sorry for kind of going on for a long talk, but I really think this is a fascinating philosophical concept that deserves exploration. Because depending on where you sit on that, it makes a lot of sense to me that I, as somebody who does believe that there is something a bit deeper to the rights of man, as opposed to just what, you know, man decrees. It explains a lot of my differences in perspective about the world and about government, as opposed to some of you guys, my viewers, who may not believe that. I just think it's really interesting. It's worth exploring. I think exploring foundational worldview understandings is really critical in order to have an open and honest dialogue and really come to understand each other's side. So I hope you guys are interested in that, and I hope to see some responses. Thank you all very much for watching. I do hope you enjoyed. If so, then be sure to hit that like button, leave a comment, and subscribe. And I, as always, will see you guys next time.